Hello and welcome to our fifth and final masterclass of the National Concert Hall's International Master Course. Today it gives me great pleasure to introduce my fellow artistic director of the International Master Course, the wonderful violinist Gwendolyn Masin. Gwendolyn is one of today's significant concert violinists. She performs internationally to praise from press and audiences alike as a soloist, chamber musician and as guest with orchestras. Gwendolyn teaches violin and chamber music masterclasses at institutes and festivals throughout Europe and North America and gives talks concerning her areas of expertise. She is also an artistic director and PhD scholar. She is professor of violin studies at the Haute École de Musique de Genève in Geneva, Switzerland, since September 2013. She is also the author of the award-winning book Michaele's Music House, The Magic of the Violin, which is available in English and German and is part of the European String Teachers Association edition collection available via Müller und Schade. I would also like to mention that this masterclass will last approximately 2 hours. We have 4 participants standing by to take part. Each will receive a class of around 30 minutes. And following the last class, we will have a brief Q&A session with Gwendolyn. So if you are watching this on our YouTube channel, you can submit any questions you have for Gwendolyn at any time via the YouTube live chat, and we'll bring a selection of those questions to Gwendolyn at the end of the class in about 2 hours' time. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first participant in this afternoon's class, and that is Romana Szczepaniak. Romana graduated from the Royal College of Music in London, the class of Professor Maciej Rakowski, and she currently resides in London. She enjoys her career as a soloist, chamber musician, teacher, and session orchestra player. She has taken part in many music festivals and masterclasses across Europe. She has performed, among other places, at Cadogan Hall, Royal Albert Hall, Royal Festival Hall, St. John Smith Square, King's Place, London. Romana is a winner of numerous competitions and awards: Musicians Benevolent Fund Postgraduate Performance Award in London, 2012-2013, the Kenneth Page Foundation Special Award for Luchslavsky performance, violin competitions in Pontivrea, Premier Rock Jakai in Italy, and in Poznan, also in Poland, in 2003. Romana has worked and received masterclasses from such artists as Leonid Kerbel, Peter Schumacher, Carol Presland, Mark Messenger, Hannah Dawson, Charles Owen, Caroline Palmer, Madeline Mitchell, Charles Roscoe, the Belcher Quartet, and the Sacconi Quartet. That's quite the list. And Romana is playing today for us some Bach, which is lovely to start with. We're going to now hear the Adagio from Bach's Violin Sonata No. 1 in G minor, BWV 1001. So Romana and Gwendolyn, you're welcome, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Romana. Beautiful playing. During a time when so much has gone online and more or less very little is happening offline, that was such a beautiful performance to receive. You really treated it like this is a concert hall. So thank you very much. That was gorgeous. I really enjoyed listening to you. And I love how you play this piece. It's a piece steeped in tradition and history and research and mythology and discussion, and I think it's a wonderful choice, a brave choice, and I'm very thankful that you've played this for us today. It's beautiful. Did you enjoy playing?
Very much so. Yes, of course. It's a great pleasure. Currently, I'm just experimenting a little bit about the tempo of the whole Adagio, so I try to push the tempo a little bit forward, and yeah.
Wonderful. It sounds great. Let's slot in there with your mention of tempo. Bach handily left us absolutely no indication of metronome markings. That has something to do with the fact that metronomes didn't exist in that time. And perhaps it is an idea to perhaps not play this piece in a methodical, metronomical fashion in the first place. He mentions that this is an adagio. So that's already helpful for us to know that it's neither a lento nor a grave nor an andante. And now he has, as we know through copious study, we've come to the understanding that most, if not all, of the pieces in Bach's solo works for string instrumentalists, so his violin and cello suites, are dances of some sort. And to that end, I would suggest that perhaps you don't play this too slow. But I found that your bass tempo for this was very nice, it was very interesting. I would recommend that you find a little bit of direction. I would recommend that we perhaps have a little bit of a look at the chordal way of playing things, the chords in it, as opposed to chordal structure, just how do we confront and go about playing the chords. And I'd like to look a little bit at the improvisatory nature of Bach, which is inherent in his music. If you compare Bach to any of his contemporaries, Vivaldi, Telemann, you'll see that he is fastidious about writing out what he sees as ornamentation. Perhaps in light of today, a more contemporary view would be to say that there has to be some form of feeling of chance to it. There's nothing left to chance in Bach's writing. I mean, he's as meticulous as Mozart would have been, absolutely more or less perfect in how they annotated what they wanted. But we also have to perhaps bear in mind that composers in general have very little means to get an idea across. They've got a pen and paper or some copper plates as far as Bach is concerned, and there's very little they can do in the ways of informing us. Certainly Bach hasn't informed us very much about dynamic, nuance, colour, diversity. He hasn't spoken about direct tempo changes. There's no mention of ritenuto, accelerando, nothing. What we do have, and this sometimes could be seen as slightly an impingement on our freedom, is that he has bars. And where in perhaps faster movements we could see those bars as very helpful, sometimes, particularly in the slow movements, bar lines can seem distracting because they can give us this idea that we are about to confront a first beat or a heavy beat, or we're about to break up a bar. And if we look at the way he's written this, there is a mix of upbeat suggestions in the music, and of course this very sort of opening, this clear opening. So with the clear opening, I mean that he starts on one with a chord. Into an upbeat type of phrase, and that's where we have his next one according to here. So that can be confusing, and depending on which score we're looking at, I've got a couple of editions open in front of me. Depending on which score we look at, for example, I am looking at a version from Händel from 1987. It's not the most current, but his second bar goes across the page and starts on the second stave of the bar, and that can be confusing also visually. It can lead people to play things like, or in the case of another edition, it would sound like, and that chord suggests a reminiscence of the very first note, but the way it's placed in the bar, it's not a heavy one, it's the resolution of an opening phrase. So let's have a quick look, just touching upon, we don't have that much time, unfortunately, touching upon a general sort of brief outline of the opening section. I know that you flagged to me that you want to look at the midsection of this today. And when I say we don't have much time, unfortunately, that's just in reference to the fact that I'd love to spend all day working on this with you. But let's try and get done what we can. I'd love for you to start from the beginning again and try to consider all the faster notes, or at least the faster notated notes, with a slight lightness to them. And allow yourself to be surprised as you play. So try to, although I realize that that's very difficult, particularly when you're on camera, try to shake off your sense of self-consciousness and just sort of go, well, what would I do if the framework was simply, and everything written in between, something of my own invention that just occurred to me as I played. Beautiful, thank you. Beautiful. How did that feel? Did that feel a little bit more free?
Definitely. Yeah.
Oh, I'm delighted to hear it. Let's work a little bit on physical form. Romana, you and I have met virtually a number of times, so I feel confident talking to you about how we perform from a technical point of view as far as physicality is concerned. And I'd like to focus a little bit on the right hand. I know that we've spoken about this in the past. And we've identified that when you are moving from the top end of a chord in the higher upper registers to the lower end of a chord, of a next chord, following chord, in the low, starting the lower registers, you've mentioned that there is a slight, you feel that there's a gap in the continuity of sound and movement. And of course, when we perform music, we're trying to get a certain seamlessness across. Even when we play rests, we play them. We don't sort of kind of go, oh, well, there's a rest now, to sort of hear a cup of tea, you know. There's a seamlessness involved. When we perform music, and even in the silence, there is some form of activity and energy that we feel, that we exude, that we try to have as a form of exchange with our listener. So on that note, let's talk about something like, let me think for a second. Here's a typical example. We are going from a mid note, this time being the A string, to the lower G string. And there's a couple of things that we're noticing here. We're trying to get a slight diminuendo because it's, as I said, sort of the culmination, the resolution of an opening phrase. If not the end of things, it's certainly a sort of a closing off within a structure. So what we want to avoid is a gap in sound. And we also want to avoid an accent on that opening part of the chord, that a spike. Yeah, we want to avoid a spike in sound because that's not going to be seen as beautiful. It's not organic to the ear. So I know we've spoken about this in the past. When I've asked you in the past what you think about as you stroke the bow, as you perform with the bow, you've mentioned that you're thinking about your index finger, your little finger, and your wrist. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
And as an experiment, I'd like for you to try to consider the execution of a chord, as opposed to a double stop, of a chord, as being led by your elbow, your right elbow. So just having the impression, and when I say elbow, I don't just mean the top part that we might most frequently be thinking of. I mean the elbow as a structure, the elbow as a hinge point and as a joint that connects the forearm to the upper arm. Okay? And I'd like you, as you perform, to try and imagine moving with this note, with this part of the arm, as you create notes, as opposed to thinking only of the lowest or at the most extreme part of your arm, which is the hand. Would you like to try that? Just that particular instance, so that we can just zone in on that particular issue. Very good. And then let's also look at the relationship of the weight of the bow, the heaviness of the bow, which it's a real conundrum. We have a challenge here to try and take that heaviness at the heel, which is anyway a challenge, and then at the heel move it across without touching the middle string, or at least audibly, and then striking the G without an accent. So the biggest problem here is when we let the bow do its own thing, if we let go of it and just sort of fall onto the G string in a random-like fashion, which is what we hear and see frequently. Well, we want to avoid that. We also don't want this happening and just the bow moving. That's why I'm telling you to lead from the elbow, so that your elbow is involved in the movement as you travel from the A string to the G string. It's quite a big movement, particularly because although distance on the instrument is like very little, the actual distance between strings here across the bridge, for example, is very, very little. When you actually execute the movement, it's massive. At least it may feel massive. So, and at the same time, I'd like you to, as you draw the heel through the air, become aware of the relationship you have with the heel between your thumb and little finger. So you feel the weight and you enjoy the weight. So just allow gravity to do its thing and carry the bow with you across the strings. And perhaps, it sounds wonderful, perhaps roll this slightly. You've been rolling from the beginning here. So perhaps just in keeping with your own idea, perhaps don't break form too much by, at the end of the phrase, drawing all notes at the same time, but considering to echo what you did in the beginning. Yeah, and bravo for the voice leading. A lot of people finish here and that can be confusing. In fact, the top notes are, so they have the idea that the F sharp goes to the G, but you've correctly identified is the end and not. Well done on that. So let's continue from with the phrase. Very nice. That's beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful playing. Let's have a little look at some of the voices that are starting to take place in the section you've just been playing now, which for those following with the score, it's around bars 3 onwards. With Bach, often when we think of Bach, what we think of are chords. But, and when we speak of chords, we immediately think of polyphony. But in this particular case, I think it's also very helpful to think of what's happening when he writes in a single voice, in a single line. So when he has a horizontal line that he's creating. And from that point of view, I think it's important to remember that within that horizontal or singular line, there's polyphony going on. Mm-hmm. An example of that is here. Which is again a different voice. The same can be said of lines here that we can try and figure out, okay, are we going for a different character? Are we trying to accentuate different notes as we go along? Where are we searching for the line, the voice leading? So yeah, the voice leading is not only happening in chords and double stop, but it's continuing throughout. Let's have a look. I really enjoyed what you're doing. Let's have a look from here, just where you've closed. To delve into that part of the music.
Sorry.
Thank you. Now, in an age where we're communicating via Zoom and where all the finesse and the nuance of playing an acoustic instrument live, where people are close by within the same acoustic sphere, it's very hard to talk about dynamics. It's hard to talk about even speed sometimes, depending on internet connectivity, how we're doing. But what I think we can dare to delve into is the lightness and heaviness of how music is formed. And that's something that we can hear, we can see it, and I can recognize it from your general movement, from the general direction of looking at you and observing your bow speed. So I think what I'm seeing here is a slight difference to how you've begun the piece. There was a slight lightness, or more lightness at the start, or shall we say more direction. It feels a little bit like in the beginning you've decided, okay, I kind of know where I'm going here. I'm going to go here. And at this part, you're going back to an older tempo potentially, or a tempo that you used to be in potentially. And you're going to a certain heaviness that doesn't fit in anymore with what you did in the beginning. So for example, here, you're building it up nearly as if he had written this around the 1850s, 1860s, which is 100 years after. Yeah. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's your conviction and that's how you want to play it, it's going to be very hard to argue and tell you, well, you can't play it like that. And I would suggest that anybody who tells you to not play it that way because it's not right, you can just simply go, well, fair enough, let's ask Bach himself, shall we? So at that point, because we don't have documentation of how this was played from his time, it will be a never-ending and bright and beautiful discussion. Having said that, I think it's important to look at the architecture of how Bach writes. And I think it's important to bear in mind that when he writes, graphically spoken, it's pretty clear where he's going. I don't think that there's a slowing down here, particularly not in the middle of the beat. If we strip it away and kind of go back to looking at where the primary line could be, it's unlikely that if you played it just like that, that you play. I think you're being led by, which is also fine. What do you think, Romana?
I always did slow it down there. That's definitely, that was my thing. I would love to try without it.
Let's see what happens. And as a general tip, because I'm aware of the time that we have left, as a general idea, just for you to experiment with during a time when, in the summertime, there's a certain freedom to how we practice. Many of us, particularly in this time of COVID-19, don't feel this pressure to learn pieces quickly, play them quickly, and move on to the next. So if you have the time, just relish it right now. There's a certain beauty that we have in this imposed holiday that most musicians are taking. Try to imagine playing Bach and stripping it down and away from the ideas of tempo changing, away from the ideas of dynamic changes, away from the ideas of rubato that we've known in the past. Take away in your mind the idea of the bar line. Free the piece from its bar lines and start to looking at it both vertically, structurally, and horizontally in a linear way. And consider playing things like what I'm trying to do is move in a general wave and a certain sense of spontaneity. I don't think I've ever played it like that before, and it's unlikely I'll ever play it quite like that after. I've basically delineated certain points in the music that today are markers for me that I want to move around. And I'm working more with nuances of the bow, with, again, leading from the elbow so that I have an ease of playing these chords as I move along. Let's try one more time. Let's try from, just to wrap up this part, from here until where I just closed on the fermata there. thank you. I would love to hear more. We would all love to hear more, but for today we have to close here. Thank you so much for your time, Romana. We'll see you towards the end of this masterclass again to talk with you. And I'm very grateful for your time today. Thanks for playing.
Thank you for.
It's been a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Take care. See you soon.
Thank you so much, Romana. Thank you, Gwendolyn. I'd like to hear that Bach. And we're now going to continue, I think, with the same sonata. We're going to hear the Presto now from that very same sonata in G minor by Johann Sebastian Bach, performed by the young Dublin violinist Daimee Ng, who I seem to recall took part in our inaugural International Master Course at the National Concert Hall last year. Damie began playing the violin at the age of 3 and is currently a student of Professor Ronald Masin at the Young European Strings School of Music in Dublin, Ireland, and plays the Andrea Pastacchini violin from approximately 1848, which has generously been loaned to her by the Music Instrument Fund of Ireland. So welcome, Damie, and we look forward to hearing your Bach. Thank you. We seem to have lost Damie's video there for a moment, have we? There we are.
Wonderful. Damie, how long have you been playing this piece?
About 2.5 months now.
Oh wow, fantastic. Well done. That's fantastic going in such a short time. Is this the first time you've played it in public?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. That I know sounds like a strange question concerning the lockdown. I mean, the whole world is going through different stages of this COVID situation, and I know that Ireland has been very careful. So I wasn't quite sure if you had or hadn't, or perhaps in an online context played it elsewhere. So thank you for that information. Damie, may I ask how old you are?
I'm 15.
You're 15. Wow. So fantastic. You all the more. I remember when I would have played pieces like this at your age that they always seemed like a marathon. They seemed so simple at home, practicing, and it could be argued that the single voice pieces from Bach are easier than these chordal ones. But I think after having played it just now, you'll probably feel that that's not true. Are you in any way tired or fatigued in either of your hands?
Yes, a little bit, yeah.
Okay. I know the feeling only too well. Thankfully, I haven't experienced it in a number of years, but I remember what it's like, and I've spent all the time in interim between having felt fatigued and not, trying to figure out why one does and doesn't feel fatigued. Very often when we play a piece like this, particularly when we practice it, we practice this endlessly, or I speak for myself. I practice this endlessly, and I can imagine you are doing the same. And there are passages that are easier and more difficult to play. And it has a lot to do with our mindset, how we approach the piece. There's a lot to do with how we hold our bow and our instrument, and a lot to do with the dexterity and the freedom we feel in our left hand. Let's start to talk a little bit about form first, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about some basic thoughts I have regarding Bach, and how you're performing it and how I might be thinking about it may differ for you to consider. And let's talk a little bit about how we practice this piece, because I think that how we end up performing on stage is a real marker, a real indication, I should say, for how we practice at home. So let's talk a little bit about the piece first. It's marked Presto.
Yes.
It's the final of 4 movements of the G minor sonata. Presto, what on earth does that mean? Presto is going to sound different in a boomy church than it's going to sound in a dry hall. In a boomy church, we'll probably slow our speed down so that people can hear every note. In a drier place, we can speed it up. When you look at the score, can you describe to those listeners who aren't watching with a score what the main way of writing the rhythm looks like in this movement?
So it's in 3/8, so there are 6 semiquavers beamed together in every bar for the entire movement, pretty much.
Okay. And you'll agree that it takes on a form, and particularly at the start of each half, the pieces
Yes.
to nearly equal halves. And he writes, and this is my question to you, does he write 3 sets of 2 or 2 sets of 3? In other words, does he write, I'm going to explain this slowly just to explain what I meant. Yeah, I see your brain going. Or does he write, I should say,
I think he differs between both of them in different parts of the piece.
in those particular instances that I've showed you, do you think he's writing 2 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 2? I'll put you out of the thinking process. It could be either, to be honest. You could play, or you could play, and honestly, they can fight about it with you, but they're unlikely to get up while you're playing and go, oh no, not that way. Now, if you want to take the 3/8 to be a marker, then it will be, okay, and if we follow the indication as it looks visually, he's coupling 3 notes in repetition as a sequence. Okay, take that home as an idea to think about, because it will give you something fresh to occupy your brain. What I honestly think is happening when you practice is that there's nothing new coming to your brain. Now, don't get me wrong, you're highly intelligent, it's absolutely obvious. When I said that you're not doing anything to occupy your brain in new ways, I'm not suggesting anything about your intelligence. What I'm simply suggesting is that you may have gotten stuck in a rut when it comes to what you can newly create and envisage and experience in this piece.
Okay.
So think about that part of things. Then think about how heavy you perform this or light. It's the same thing I said to Romana. It's very hard for any of us here to judge just how heavy or strong you're playing it. Now, I'm aware of the fact, and looking at you, you must have a light around you. You look very well lit. And judging from the sound, you've got a microphone that's picking up, and you've got a fantastic network. Very happy for you. That's fantastic. It's a pleasure to teach like this. So, having said that, nevertheless, there are so many nuances that are going missing when I teach, and I'm aware of that. But there again is an indication of heaviness here. And I find that you're focusing on a richness of sound, and that is taking you away from very important things. So you don't have to prove how rich and beautiful your sound is, because it's clear. And part of the reason I know that you're interested in that is because of the heaviness of your very first note. And then there's this particularly sort of repetitious way you have of interpreting. That's a full, gorgeous sharing. Well, I'm not suggesting how you have a full, gorgeous sharing sound, but it goes in that direction, and it's a beautiful way of performing, and it's very valid, but potentially not so much up to date anymore. If we have a look at all the performance practice knowledge available to us at our fingertips right now, I would strongly recommend that you lean away from making such heavy rubato, such accentuation on notes, because the way you're performing it, you're editing the piece in such a way that one would suggest that it's full of dynamics, full of accents, sforzati, vibrato markings, and so on as you perform. And it takes away a little bit about the simplicity and the beauty. I mean, when I say simplicity, I don't mean that it's simple music, but there's a certain simplicity and clarity in how he's written it. So I prefer you to play a little bit more like a butterfly on a summer's day, free, and a little bit less like a queen making her entry. And both are fine, and both are valid, but particularly because it's a presto, I think the idea of the butterfly is more apt for your imagination than that sort of heavy entrance. So consider speeding things up a little, using a little bit less bow. Try to contain your sound more towards the middle part, which is the liveliest and most buoyant part of your bow, which will help you also to focus less on weight delivery. I think you're very busy with weight delivery in the right hand on the bow, and I think, and this is a very important thing to consider, I think you might wish to consider your fingerings and try to put as much as you can in the first position.
Okay.
It will make your violin sounds brighter.
Okay.
Lighter. It'll be easier for your left hand to play. You're doing a huge amount of shifting everywhere. Now there is shifting involved that we cannot avoid in this piece.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's a lot to be said for avoiding the higher registers in the G string and the D string, which produce that luscious, romantic, sentimentally gorgeous sound, which however in this piece is not quite as relevant, shall we say, or
Okay.
relevant, appropriate, sorry is the word I'm looking for. Let's try again, speed it up a little bit. Try to take away, as I said with Romana, take away those bar lines. Those bar lines can be misleading, and those bar lines actually cage our minds and the music. So free it from that feeling of imprisonment. And consider playing with less bow, lighter, and just play it at a slightly speedier lick until, let's give you a bar number for orientation. Let's go until bar 17, which is this new part, which we can talk about separately. Thank you. Very good. You've interrupted yourself in a way, but it's very good. You've interrupted yourself musically, I should say. So with interrupting yourself musically, I mean that you're trying to be more conscious. Let's try it again, and try, Damie, for once to avoid interpreting it. I'd like you to pretend as an exercise that you're not trying to interpret this piece, you're playing it. Now that doesn't mean you're switching your brain off. It also doesn't mean that you're sort of blanking out into the sort of, okay, this is a study, I'm kind of bored thing, not at all. And I hope that you don't think studies are boring, but just Try to relieve yourself of having to play loudly and focus on the quality of your sound rather than volume. Okay, so don't think about the heaviness of the sound, and go away from what you're continuing to do, and don't emphasize each first note. Try to play them equal to what came before as an exercise. This is just an exercise, and I'd like you to experiment with something, mainly because I'd like to give your brain something new to think about.
Okay.
Thank you. Very good. Excellent. 2 small tips, and they should hopefully sort you out pretty quickly. In this area, which is difficult, the changes of position are tricky. Rather than practicing that for hours on end and not figuring out why it's not where you'd like it to be, focus simply on the speed of your left hand. Just think. Move faster. Move faster. Move faster when you shift position. You just have to think it.
Okay.
Thinking it is enough. There's nothing to practice here. Just stay awake in your mind. The other thing, Damie, is you're still doing... Now, I'd like you to teach me. I'd like you to help me. Advise me, why is this... Why is that one note on the E string peeking out so much? Not just because it's on the E string. That's not the answer I'm looking for.
Well, it's one separate bow compared to the other 5 notes, which are all joined together.
And what else am I doing?
Well, you're putting more weight on that note.
Am I? I'll tell you what I'm doing. If it sounds like more weight, that's fair enough. But what I'm mainly doing is I'm spending much more bow.
Yeah.
Much more bow speed. I'm using nearly as much bow on the down bow for one note as I'm using for all the bows slurred.
Yeah.
Try to reduce the amount of bow you use. Try to reduce the bow speed, because bow speed, that acceleration moving along the string, creates more sound.
Yeah.
So try it a little and perhaps slow it down once, because that's a lot of information to take in. Try that once in slow motion. Excellent. Wow, fantastic. That was a quick turnaround. Well done, you. Try it again, and this time, as an exercise, lighten the weight on your bow more than what comes after. So as an exercise, now that'll feel highly over-exaggerated, and I am aware of that. But no matter what way you're going to practice this, it will always, in playing, as you recognized when you played it through the first time and realized that it's quite the marathon to play this piece quickly. Once you go on stage to play it, it'll always have a little bit more weight on it than you've practiced, and that's just fine. So once, and make sure that show your listeners when you perform that this is going there and not, because again, try to think without bar lines. And follow the actual line of music that Bach wrote. If you look at the scores, for those watching, and have a look yourself at Damie, are you on bar 5 finishing a stave?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I can hear that when you play. Okay. I can literally hear your eye crossing from one stave to the next. So we want to avoid that. That's the first thing. The other thing, if you look in the music, Damie, you'll see that despite the fact that he has slurs, which would indicate a unit in Bach, he also has this. If you look within a unit of 6, there's in sequence the D string sounding out and starting an ascension. Do you see that?
Yes.
Descent, ascent, descent, ascent. And just the idea of moving your mind away from this constant 3 times 2 or 2 times 3 in the bar. this constant. Okay, he's slotting in these units, always these 6 notes. Try to think away from that, think even away from the slur, and start following the trajectory of how he's moving along. And you'll see that there's a lot of really surprising elements, such as this. And so on and so forth. It doesn't have to be this constant, okay, we're putting weight here on the 1, we're putting weight here on 1, we're putting weight here on 1. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's actually tiring. Try once to do that in slow motion again from bar 4. The lightness of the higher note on the E string. Wonderful, wonderful. Now continue, because I'm again aware of time. Try it in tempo, and this time lead us to the F sharp and to the G. F sharp being, or when I say lead us, close the phrase and start the next one in the middle.
Yeah.
On 1. Okay, go for it. Wonderful. Please do continue.
Okay.
Very, very good. I'd like to compliment you on so many things. You're so quick in taking information and executing that into a new thought. So, for example, your left hand was so much brighter and more intelligent in its movement, shall we say, in bars 16 and 17, those more difficult shifts that I spoke about earlier. So, bravo you. Let's go from here. Now, you mentioned earlier on that Bach could, in this piece, you could either interpret it as 2 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 2. Now that is not incorrect, Damie. At the start when I asked you that question, it was in respect to the beginning of each half. But now we're going into that area that you correctly suggested could be seen as either way. Let's play from bar, sorry, it's all very small here on my screen, bar 24 until here. Actually, you could just play, because we're close to the end of our lesson as well, play until the first ending of the first half, the first repeat set. Thank you. Very nice. I recommend very strongly that you play this up open and not twice down. You'll lose too much time. Let's have a look at that. And again, for those following the score, I'm going to start talking now about bar 29. So Damie has beautifully played these 2 voices in conversation within each bar. And now we get to hear. Consider slurs as an indication in Bach a little bit about the direction he wants things to go in. If I were to exaggerate that, it could sound like this. And that sense of movement, that sense of flexibility makes it much more exciting to the ear. The same goes for a little bit later around bar 40. And here I'd like to talk about the differing voices. Is one thing going on. The other thing going on is so, and perhaps here, rather than working with tempo and working with a strong sense of dynamic, work with this inner sense of excitement. Sorry. Yeah, this. And when you get here, this is anyway complex. Sorry, you see him? As far as intonation is concerned. So don't waste time on doing things like that. That's not going to help.
Yeah.
That breaking of the movement in the right arm is very relevant, or again, I make the same mistake, appropriate for music later or in different parts of the piece. But here at this point, you're losing too much time.
Yeah. Okay.
Your brain is so busy trying to change bow that it forgets that there's a lot going on the left hand. So I recommend you take the chance that you receive at the open A string to already prepare your left hand. Here, yeah. And do you play second? You play second position.
Second position.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Could you play for us to close this beautiful time that we've enjoyed with you? Could you play for us again with these things in mind from bar 24 until that end of the first half, Damie?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. And already there I see an improvement in the last two notes as well. Do you feel a little lighter, a little bit more released when you play now?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Wonderful. I hope you also feel a little bit less under pressure. The first time playing through a piece like Bach for an audience is always the most difficult. It is running the marathon, even if it's a short one. It's a short, long marathon, yeah? And you've done brilliantly. And I'd like to thank you so much for playing Bach today for us. It sounds gorgeous. I wish you lots of luck and fun with it. And try to remember to always find new things for your brain to focus on so as to keep you awake and to move you away from things that you've started to do as habit. Don't play the first note of a bar heavier because that's just how it's done. That's actually you getting bored. Your brain has gotten bored. Try to do it differently each time. Keep reinterpreting the piece, and it's the best way to learn it. And when you practice that way, that intensively, that with intense, I should say, awake. It's not about practicing many hours, but being there and awake and focused when you practice. You'll find that once you come to performing on stage, things will flow a lot more easily for you. Damie, bravo, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. And now we will take a short break of 3 minutes. Don't go far because we have two more great young violinists standing in the wings waiting to play for Gwendolyn. But now we're going to let Gwendolyn have a breather of about 3 minutes. And I will just take this opportunity to remind people who are watching on YouTube that if you have questions for Gwendolyn, to please submit them via the YouTube live chat and we will bring them to Gwendolyn at the end. So, see you in 3 minutes. Thank you very much. So that's 3 minutes, and welcome back to the second part of our violin masterclass with Gwendolyn Masin. And standing by now we have Jaga Klimaszewska, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Yaga. She's a Polish violinist based in London, where she graduated from Guildhall School of Music and Drama and at the Royal College of Music as well. She's a keen chamber musician, soloist, and a huge fan of anything to do with stretching, and understanding musicians' bodies. Yaga and pianist Mateusz Retner recorded their debut CD with Dux label, where they presented music by Gorazina Bacevich. And Yaga is going to play for us now the cadenza from Ravel's Tzigane. Thank you, Yaga. Welcome to our class.
Fantastic playing. Bravo. Thank you so much. Gorgeous. It's interesting, Yaga, to see that this time that we're experiencing has brought out some of the most difficult repertoire ever written for the violin.
True. Yeah.
So what will I play if I don't have a pianist? Bach. Oh, well, that's kind of hard. Ravel. Oh, Well done. Gorgeous playing. Thank you. So many wonderful things. Great sound production. A wonderful idea of interpretation, of a fashioning of the music to make it your own. A lot of really, really sound, solid things in your technique. I really enjoyed it. Personally, I'd love to talk a little bit about the shape of some of the music. I don't know if you have any things that you'd like to focus on along with the things that we can talk about today.
Sorry, it's just my head is somewhere else after this. Definitely the second page, there are some things there. And as you said, some shapes on the first page, I would say I'm still looking, it's quite fresh, so I was looking for the right direction and trying to decide. There's so much you can do with this piece that I'm very looking forward to hearing what you...
Oh, thank you, Yaga. Wonderful. With great pleasure. We've worked on this before. You brought this already, how long is it ago that I heard you performing this before?
I think it was in middle of June, and that was my first ever public performance of it at the Exhale at Play For Us, which was great. And so it does feel different now, of course, for the second time. But it's wonderful to get a stage. So thank you.
Yes, I agree. And again, thank you to the National Concert Hall in Dublin, Ireland, for affording us this opportunity for something that was supposed to take place offline for a week in Dublin at the National Concert Hall, which is a beautiful facility in the heart of the city, and with classical music actually at the heart of the country. And so still taking the time to afford us this space, which is beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about Ravel and how, there are so many amazing, stunning recordings and interpretations around that document this piece's life. A few things I'd like to get across myself. It's a rhapsody. And the story of it is that it was first written as a symphonic work before it was then later arranged by the composer for violin and luthial, this mythical, amazing instrument of which there are some examples apparently in Paris, and then that's about it. And this luthial is wonderful, but I have never had the pleasure of seeing it live in front of me, unfortunately. And that was something that caused me a lot of distress. There's this hugely famous piece for the violin written by this hugely accomplished enigma of a composer, and then he scores it for this instrument of which there are so few examples that it's unlikely that the greater percentage of violinists will ever actually lay eyes on it. So I started going over the books, and I noticed that it's written, this piece is dedicated to Jeli Darányi, who was a fantastic Hungarian female violinist. I stress the fact that she was female simply because of the fact that there were so few female violinists across time. Up until around, shall we say, 40 years ago. We can count them on one or two hands. Jeanette Neveu, Jeli Darányi, of course Ida Handel, who unfortunately passed very recently. So having a piece dedicated to her is quite something, and perhaps just for you to know. There might have been quite a bit of a skirmish behind the scenes, because Jeli Darányi was also somebody who Bartók was working with and hugely impressed by. So I'm quite convinced that there was a tug of war of interests between Ravel and Bartók as they tried to get their proverbial musical hands on her attention. Make that of that what you will. Jeli Darányi, the surname nearly says it, golden of gold. And it's perhaps important to realize that Ravel was hugely impressed by elements of jazz that he'd gotten in contact with, of which he then made a sort of persiflage in his music. And for example, in the Blues Sonata for violin and piano. And also by folk music. which he saw as the music of the Tzigane, which is perhaps something that is now wreathed in a political awareness, but at the time was simply a denotion for music upheld by Roma and Sinti, and who have beautiful qualities of music that they've handed down to one another across generations. And most of them have the ability to play in ways that I can't even begin to describe. I mean, it's incredible what they do. So there's a lot of things flowing into this piece. There's Ravel's awareness of so-called folk music, his idea of the improvisational element that is found in folk and jazz music, which you can see here in this music, but there's also the idea of the Hungarian influence of the female violin player. And then there's this luteal, which is this jarring problem in all of this. And I actually had a conversation with Gilles Pop via email in the last few days. Gilles is also teaching at the National Concert Hall's second International Master Course. I'm a huge admirer of his playing. And I noticed that we have recordings a year apart. And I promise you, we didn't know of each other's recordings, where we both recorded this piece with cimbalom, which is the Hungarian, more or less Hungarian national instrument. And the cimbalom is an instrument that you can find across many folk ethnic groups, cultural traditions. And the cimbalom in the Hungarian fashion is a very large dulcimer. It's a very virtuoso instrument. So when he writes in the orchestral version, after you just finish playing, the entrance of the harp, that's probably a cimbalom that he had in his ears. And that luteal was probably some flight of fancy at the time that he was like, well, this'll do. But I'm quite convinced that the Hungarian influence in this music is of vital importance. And I'm also quite convinced that, and I'm sure he would have a row with me if he were alive, that Ravel was hugely impressed by all these things and potentially slightly confused. Don't tell him I said that. And with confused, I mean, on the one hand, he wants this improvisational style. He even writes at the very beginning, lento quasi cadenza, quasi. And he has us there, that just one word, that quasi, because if you look at this piece, I know very few examples of music where the specifications of rhythmic integrity are so clearly denoted. I mean, and I've had some pedantic teachers, and they shall remain nameless, who have really been like, it's... And that's it, and if you do anything outside of that, ooh, there'll be... Yeah. So, you want to find some kind of a balance between playing too episodically and too focused into detail. Rest. Rest, and then taking a longer rest, because it is a longer rest, and then much shorter rest. Slightly longer rest again. Longer rest. Breathe. And then longer note than the first time. Something new here, folks. So you want to find a balance between playing it too broken up and zooming out for the big picture. And it's try it again, just the opening. I know you want to focus on page 2. It's clear. I've heard you.
No, that's great.
But just that you know that I think you're at a stage in your learning where we can go away from it says this in the score, which is fair enough, always fair enough, to yes, but it is quasi cadenza, and now we're just going to interpret that differently. It's kind of cadenza. You know, at this stage there have been so many interpretations of it. Why not have one from Yaga? So feel free to interpret. That's gorgeous. The only thing I would say to you, because I don't want to get in the way of other things, I don't want to get in the way of your interpretation, because I think you're an artist and you should be given your space, and you do beautifully. Are you familiar with Hungarian language?
Well, I heard it. I can't speak it.
Okay.
But
All
I've
right.
been in Budapest a few times. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So, of course, it's a French composer, Ravel. I know it, but the way that he's writing these things, these are hugely Bartokian. Those things you'll find throughout, and Bartokian actually ends up meaning very often folk traditional music. So Kodály and Bartók, as you know, probably were going around their country and Transylvania and all the regions around collecting folk music. We have documentation, and we know from the Hungarian language that there is an emphasis on the first syllable of every word. And I can do that because my mom's Hungarian, so no one's going to be given out to me for making a camouflage, a characteristic of something. So now the thing is, I'd like to bear that in mind. Don't focus on... No, you're not playing that, but I'm just exaggerating here. But bring it out. And here, I wouldn't swallow it. Exactly. Because once we're out of this mess, and we go back on stage, we'll be somewhere between dry holes, medium dry. You know, it's a bit like the description of a champagne. And hopefully we'll taste as nice when we go there on stage and play whatever music has become meaningful for us in this time. And consider what you want to sound like. So consider what you want to be heard as if you play in a boomy hole. If you play it'll be gone, it'll disappear. Yeah, so give yourself the space. I loved all of this. Can I just go and can we skip to figure 1? Please.
Sorry.
That's gorgeous, Yaga. That's really lovely. That's just gorgeous. I love the crunch in your sound. I like that there's a little bit of bite in it. And there needs to be. This is way high up in the G string. It's hard to make sound. And even with the circumstances in which we find ourselves, I can just tell there's an energy to it, and I love it. Well done, you. Because I noticed that you did this the second time. Make sure we can hear your grace note.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed it in the hall.
No worries. Now let's talk a little bit about try to, in this moment, think of a staccato in your left hand.
Okay.
For the precision of it. And staccato I say on purpose, because in a staccato you're going to have a catch release between each note. And it's that relief in sound that I would like you to have in your left hand fingertips, so that you don't hold on to the string and pressurize your fingertips, putting too much weight on the string. Release the pressure so that the notes can be heard more articulated. Yeah, and then just watch your semitone. Very good fingering.
I played with one finger.
Excellent.
So I'm doing 3 2 3,
Doesn't
but
work.
this is better. Yeah.
Much better. So I do the same, and I help myself even more. It's written, actually it's written
Yeah.
in one bow. But I find that that can be difficult, so could work, or just make sure that you uncoordinate well enough that your left hand is faster than your right as it moves. And it is really that close. I think I would be a huge fan of using for once the same finger
Okay.
for 2 notes. Yeah, wonderful. Can you just play what follows there? Yeah, that's nice, but you make it sound like he's written, which is not what he's written.
Triplets,
Yeah. Very good. No, yes, wonderful, but with that same integrity of sound, if you're going to be that tenacious, you're going to have to bring those notes out.
No release.
Wonderful. And try to get your left hand moving a little faster. And consider giving a slight accent to the third note. So you have a sort of a jump off point to make it burst more in its articulation.
Oh, sorry.
Wonderful. You want the second page. I'd like, to be honest, to focus on, as of figure 3, I think we could work a little bit.
Okay.
Can you go past the bird song? Just there. I wonder how we could make that sound, you and I both.
Sorry. On separate, yeah.
I think it might be helpful to play it at a different part of the bow. And consider giving a slight acceleration of bow on the covered note. So it sounds as more equal in the end to one another. And then consider this last one, the baby one, the little one kind of going, what's going on here?
I think I
As
was
opposed to
doing
just closing
it,
the phrase.
Yeah, I was doing it the other way around, but I'll try.
Oh, that's all fine.
Down, but I'll try it. It might actually be.
Okay, gorgeous, gorgeous. Sounds beautiful. Let's try and do something a little bit more, having more colors, slightly more colors, and go away from the technical difficulties. They're there. We all know it, and everyone's already long ago thinking, oh, she can play the violin. So that's been established. So you can let go of that. And can I just point out that those are grace notes? Now he writes espressivo. So one way of getting espressivo is to kind of take away some of the color before adding it on. And just consider playing it on the same string. 4/3. Yeah, we're on 3/4.
Not helping.
you'll stick in the same color. And then build. There's a long fermato. And try to be as articulate as you can here.
Oof, is it slow?
Yeah.
Right. Then it's separate.
I would recommend. Yeah. So it slides off then, doesn't it? Much easier.
It has a nice flair to it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Continue on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again.
Sorry.
It's important that we don't play, but because otherwise it kind of gets into a sloppy kind of understanding of what's rhythmically printed. So yes, it's cadenza, but I mean it has to have some framework, some point of departure. Can I, sorry, this is getting nitty gritty now. What fingering do you do? Yeah. Good, good. Try to create a little bit of a connection between, you need very little acceleration. You don't need to, not acceleration, change of position. Just sort of shift there and vibrate, and then it won't sound as broken. Excellent. Excellent. Consider we're slowly having to close, so we probably won't. Well, will we be able to finish the whole movement? No, we can try to at a squeeze. Just a very short idea. Keep your rhythm intact.
Yeah.
Try to keep excellent. Try to keep the dynamics the same. You can't sort of.
Okay. I'll try just from there. Oof. See, I'll break my violin.
Don't. Fabulous. And at this point, that magical timbalom should come in and play. Yaga, you've been amazing. It's been such a pleasure to teach you. Thank you so much. What a great piece to perform online. It sounds fabulous. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I very much hope to see you again towards the end.
Yes, see you then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yaga. Gorgeous playing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yaga. Thank you, Gwendolyn. I wish that could go on even longer. It's such wonderful music. But it's time to move on to our fourth and final participant in this afternoon's class, and that's the 12-year-old violinist Rafael Gisbertz. As I say, he's only 12. He's already very accomplished as a violinist. He started playing the violin at the age of 6.5, and already 1 year later he started to perform many concerts in Germany and abroad. He made his soloist debut with Vivaldi's Spring with the Niederrheinische Sinfoniker at the age of 9. In 2019, he performed Zigeunerweisen with the New Symphonics in the Netherlands, which was broadcast on Dutch television, NPO1. Raphael also won numerous first prizes in renowned competitions, such as the main prize in Singapore Violin Festival 2020, first Great Award in the Young Artist category up to 19 years at the Vienna International Music Competition, also in 2020, 5 times absolute high score in the German national competition Jugend musiziert, first prize and special prize at the 3rd Alfred Zammer Violin Competition in Karlsruhe in 2016. Raphael is currently being taught by Emir Imerov and regularly attends masterclasses and academies in Germany and abroad, where he worked with such teachers as the violinists Rudens Turku, Leonid Kerbel, Alexandra Sum, Yamei Yu, Ariana Mateus, Jan Talic, Stefan Arzberger, and the violist Ivo Bauer. But today he gets to play for the wonderful violinist and pedagogue and my co-artistic director, Gwendolyn Masin, and I believe he's going to play the aforementioned Zigeunerweisen by Sarasate. So welcome to Raphael.
Bravo! Fantastic! Wonderful! Thank you so much. Could I ask if it's possible to bring the camera a little bit closer to you? Wäre es möglich, ein bisschen den Kamera nach vorne? Genau. I would love to see Raphael a little bit more closely. Thank you so much. And a huge compliment to this gentleman who is playing the piano with you, who's done a great job today as well. Could we move the camera a little bit closer, because it's a little bit difficult for us to see the hands of Raphael.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So, Raphael, thank you for performing today. What a gorgeous performance. What incredible luminosity and brightness in your playing. We know each other. We've met a couple of times already during this lockdown. And I've never heard you play the Sarasate before, though, so my genuine compliments. It's gorgeous. I love it. You have the sound of a wise old sage who is at least 10 times your age, so bravo. And a compliment to your wonderful pianist for the performance, who's done a great job of following you, because the only stronger criticism I have today would be that it would be really helpful if you would indicate where you're going with the music, because right now he's like a cat falling on his feet, clawing after you. You're lucky that he found you, and you're sort of like, I'm playing here, this is great, lovely dum dum, but it is in fact chamber music. So I'll give some points off because it has been locked down, and so perhaps you haven't performed with the piano as much as you would have in the past. But phenomenal playing, great interpretation, a massive bravo. The future is safe, folks. Raphael, let's talk a little bit about some parts of the music. We won't have quite as much time because of the sheer length of the piece. But a huge applause to you for having all those runs, those difficult runs, the ones that can go awry on stage, and playing them so well. I'd like to talk a little bit about some shapes and form in it. Now, your opening is wonderful. Let's focus on, and also your staccato is fantastic. I'm nearly envious. Wonderful. Let's go from, and please exaggerate. Play with a little bit of humor. It doesn't have to be controlled. Takt 29.
The bars, please.
29.
29. Okay.
Very good. Wonderful. Now, Raphael, it sounds gorgeous. I love what you're doing. In this particular moment, it sounds a little bit too much like a caricature. It sounds a bit too much like a sort of a dancing bear. What's written is a tempo. So consider, because it comes twice, that the first time you play it, it's a little bit more to the point. And you make the joke here. And the second time, you can take a bit more time. Okay? Try it. Yeah, it's very important that your left hand also here is that it's dynamically loud enough, yeah? Yeah. Pull the string away from you. So make sure that it's loud enough. Very good. Can you play again from the second time? Bravo. Raphael, it's wonderful what you're doing. There's two things I'd like to tell you. The first thing, and I see it today more so than when we've worked together in the past, because when we work together online, I usually see you like that, which gives me a certain vantage point. Now I see you with a better full length image, and I notice that your violin is hanging a little, it's down a little. And we have spoken a little bit about your left hand in this context in the past, and I really recommend that you start looking for different solutions with your chin rest and potentially your shoulder rest, just to lift your instrument a little bit so that the space between your jaw and chin line isn't as far away from your instrument. And it'll also help to stop making your instrument so heavy as gravity does its thing. So try for now, because we don't have the solution, try to use the upper arm, this part, to hold up the violin a little bit, so to speak. So just involve, shall we say, the upper part of your arm a little bit more. Yeah, and bring your shoulder, this part of the shoulder, let it follow the movement that your hand is making. So let your hand lead and your shoulder follow the movement around. So you've got a, so you have a little bit more space, and that's wonderful. Secondly, please consider your wonderful pianist. Indicate. Don't just play together with your wonderful pianist so that he has a chance to make the accompaniment sound like it makes sense, okay? Let's try together again from... Very good, Raphael. Now, although it's written by a Spaniard, and not just any Spaniard, it's written by Sarasate, who was renowned as a virtuoso violinist. He wrote the Zigeunerweisen based on Hungarian melodies. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But the rhythm here, or depending where you play it, my point is here, it's the Hungarian language again. I spoke about it just before in Ravel. It's not what you interpret, but so just be careful that you play the right rhythm there. Try directly from here. That's right. Be careful here with your intonation. I know it's a really tricky one to practice online. Make sure that it's not constantly going up higher, and make sure that you're playing the semitones. Yes, right. Try to be closer with your fingers. Go directly from bar 39. Tricky one. Are you playing it with the second finger and the fourth? Yeah. Try to have the impression that rather than just pulling the string up, you pull the string away from you. So in the direction away from the instrument. So you've got more chance of having a reverberation of the string against your finger. Yeah, there we go. Bravo. Continue. Yeah. Good.
Continue. Okay. Yep.
Raphael, it's written at the end. It's and not. If you make a ritenuto at the end of every 4-bar phrase, it gets a little bit repetitive. So here, definitely just continue. Try to move forward a little bit, otherwise it gets very long. Yeah, and watch the intonation then. Well, anyway, just make sure that you're playing the right semitones also here. Continue. Thank you, Raphael. Thank you. Let me tell you a little story in the remaining time we have about Hungarian music. Okay? Now, I'm going to just throw it out there and say that there's 3 types of melody that might be familiar to you from the Hungarian tradition. The one that is most likely to be known to you is the Hungarian folk music, such as the music recorded and later moved and transformed into classical music by the likes of, as I mentioned before, Kodály and Bartók. And of course, then the 20th century composers thereafter. But according to your age and the fact that I happen to know that neither of your parents are musicians, which is goes all the way more to saying what a wonderful talent you are. It's really homegrown from yourself. In folk music, it would be unwise to add embellishments that the composer hasn't written down. So if you ask a Hungarian person who's a musician, classical musician, whether it's all right to do that, it's a little bit frowned upon to just add random grace notes where you will. Having said that, there is a misconception about this piece, this Zigeunerweisen. So Zigeuner is the German word for a gypsy person, and Weisen is an air or a tune. And as with Ravel, these titles wouldn't be seen as of now anymore. But let's try and understand what they were trying to indicate as the highest form of compliment. If we see it as Roma music, then we could start talking about embellishments, which we are doing throughout the entire piece. But here, in this particular section of the music, it's important for you to realize that what he's basing his music on is a song that was made popular in Hungary, which Sarasate literally stole. Now, not stealing like I steal some ideas that I hear off other people and then sort of tell everybody that I've stolen it off that person. That's called crediting someone. Stealing as in pretending it's yours, okay? And he did that until he was corrected by the original author of the song, which was like a popular song. And the popular song has lyrics to it. So in the actual lyric in Hungarian, he talks about being in love with just one little girl in the whole world. There's just one girl in the whole world. And it's all about this little sweet song to this girl. So when you play, it would be good to not be quite as thick in your sound, and perhaps not too sentimental. It's already sentimental enough. And to bear in mind that people were singing this. And again, it's in the Hungarian language, so work with that. And now take your time, if you're going to. Try to work with what there is. Try not to do a slowing down of time every 4 bars, but keep a forward motion. Let's hear it once. Only, unfortunately, we don't have enough time. Just play it once through from here until the first time that we have the closing, yeah? Please. And give it a direction. Think of this wonderful song with these beautiful lyrics and keep it simple. Just tell a story. Don't try to imitate anyone else. Just try to play the way that you feel about that song, okay?
57?
It's 45. Bar 45. Thank you very, very much. It's been a huge pleasure to listen to you today, Raphael, and thank you for making it possible to all the people who support you. I know that your father is with you today and this wonderful pianist, and I'm very grateful that you've played for us. I'm aware of the fact that we are moving onwards in time, and that I believe we're moving on towards the question and answer part of this master course. I'll hand back over to my wonderful friend and highly superb musician. I loved your masterclass yesterday, Phoebe. You were great.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. And this has been also fascinating to listen to these young violinists, and particularly interesting to see such a young player with Raphael there. So thank you. And if all violinists now could, oh, they're all back. Thank you for coming back to us. And I think now that we have some questions for Gwendolyn to wrap up this masterclass, perhaps we'll start with you, Romana. Do you have a question for Gwendolyn?
First of all, I would like to thank you. It was pretty incredible, very inspiring. Thank you very much for this possibility. Well, I would love to work more on this Adagio, really. That only just awakened my whole inspiration and the whole hunger on wanting to work more and really work more into details. So I wish we could have more time. I guess like maybe just the middle of it, when we focus on working on the middle of it, and I wish we could have time for a bit more playing. Just the direction of the whole Bach and bringing out the harmonies and work on the left hand. So I guess it's like a general inquiry for.
If I could give you a small tip, Romana, and also bearing in mind that this is not the last time we see each other, I hope, and that we can continue the work we do together. Perhaps as a form of experimentation for yourself, which is the biggest way of keeping ourselves alive mentally when we are practicing. So to stop us from going still, perhaps try to strip everything back and see Bach's music like a cathedral, and that within that architecture you have so many options. You can either see the grandiosity of the whole of it, or you can zoom into the details. And for a moment, I'd love to put you inside the cathedral, go into that music and observe it from the inside out. And then just look at the main structures. So forget about, just having, don't strip it down so far that we're only looking at bar lines, because that's really one of the biggest hindrances in performance. And the other big hindrance in performance is our eyes. Depending on what edition we play from Bärenreiter or Händel, what have you, you're, as I pointed out with Damie, you're going to have your eye crossing along staves, and you might end up interpreting music because of what your eye has seen. And you'll be amazed at how perfectly fantastic musicians catch themselves making that mistake. And pianists potentially don't do that so often, because potentially pianists are reading so much vertically, and feel free to butt in, you are the pianist here, that they have such an oversight of the music and they learn so quickly off by heart that very soon that they are able to sort of scan the music from the inside in a harmonic way, in a melodic way, and they're able to build. That's why so many fine pianists are such amazing conductors as well. I mean, they have it in them. Whereas we, us poor single-string instrumentalists, we have a harder time. We struggle a lot more with that. Go into that music, scope out, particularly in the Adagio, your main chords or your main chordal structures. Figure out your bass line. Where is the music going? Strip everything away. Then set yourself a pulse. Don't set yourself a tempo. Set yourself a pulse, whatever that pulse is for you on any day. Try to avoid going too much to the grave side. There are examples of graves in Bach's music. Don't go too much that way. Don't go all jumpy hoppy on a sort of happy andante thing. Give yourself the space. Sort out your chords in the pulse you want, and then fit your ornamentation in a sense of spontaneity into that. And work from there. And you'll find that holding on to speeds, relieving yourself of the heaviness that you might have, relieving ourselves as a collective consciousness as violinists of this huge mountain to climb when we play Bach. We as far as violinists are concerned, I would say that our top 3 composers, 4 maybe, that we are not able to play are Bach, Mozart, Paganini and Bartók. Now, of course, there are amazing Mozart, Bach, Paganini, etc. players, but some of them become specialists. So for those who are great at Mozart, that doesn't necessarily mean they find it as easy to play Paganini. Get rid of all that. Get rid of all the criticism that you hear inside of you and go at it as if it was new to you and never been played before. Free yourself from all of these burdens and then just go in and work your way out. That's what I can say in this context in such a short period of time.
Thank you.
And it's my pleasure, and thank you for playing, Romana. It's been great to work with you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Romana. Thank you, Gwendolyn. Damie, do you have a question for Gwendolyn?
I don't have a question directly about the Bach that we played, but I do have a more general kind of question. Sometimes
Great.
I've found that when I'm playing and I'm trying to do something musical, sometimes I find it quite hard to convey that to the audience. So sometimes I feel like I'm doing something, but it just doesn't get across. I was wondering if you had any tips about that.
Oh, I feel with you. And you're so smart. I remember thinking those sort of things as well, and not even being able to formulate the question, just knowing that I had that and not knowing where to go with it. So thank you for expressing that. You've caught me off guard. I don't know any of these questions. These questions are coming without my being able to prepare. So I'm just telling you the first thing that comes to my mind. And potentially this morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll wake up with a jolt going, I should have said this to Damie. And again, we won't be separated by seas of time. I know that we have a way of communicating, that I can get thoughts across to you after this masterclass still. But consider yourself an actress. Consider yourself taking on a role. Today you took on the role of the Presto by Bach. And Presto was a character written by Bach, much like Ophelia is a character written by Shakespeare, or Hamlet, or any of these people. And rather than going from the premise, which actually is the base premise, play the way you play. So research, do your research, listen to the recordings, go to the masterclasses, go to concerts, listen to people who don't play the same instrument as you, and go away from your own music, go away from classical music, go and delve into jazz or swing or rock or what have you. Be free in your choice of what you listen to, and then start reading books and go to the museum whenever we can and do all of these things. Go for a walk, look at flowers, let yourself be inspired. Now, having said all of that, pretend you're an actress, okay, and everything that you want to project to your audience, because of the fact that it's just one person playing just violin, potentially one day to a hall with anything up to 200 people, 500 people. I wish you 1,000 people if that's what you wish, okay? And they're all listening to you at the same time, and there's no amplification. We don't have these things to hide behind. Now, with that in mind, exaggerate. Exaggerate, give it 20% more, not strength, not tension, not stress. I'm not talking about giving 20%. Take 20% of that away. Less effort, more intention. Go somewhere with your ideas. If it's forte, consider it a fortissimo, but don't make it just with your weight of the arm. Make it with your intention, with a different kind of nuance in the vibrato. And try when you perform as a test for yourself. Don't do this all the time, just as an immediate test. Next time you're playing for Mr. Masin or any of the people from the Young European String School of Music, or the next opportunity you have to play, rather than standing at them from the side as you would, angle yourself slightly more towards your audience. It's scary, I know, okay? Don't go straight head on, because that's not ideal, because if you go straight head on, you can imagine what happens to the sound, okay? It's not going the way you want it to go. That's also not very helpful, yeah? But rather than strictly playing like this, as you would if you were concertmaster and so on, and as the great violinists of yore have done, angle yourself slightly this way. See what happens. Just that small movement, and the fact that you can now express from an open source. And don't angle your head too much to the left. Try and manage to be able to play as you would speak. Same sort of alignment, yeah? And then have the impression that you speak when you play and not just pulling the bow across the strings. Try that and get back to me and tell me did it help at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Damie.
Wonderful. That's a question that could apply to any instrument. Very interesting and a great answer, Gwendolyn. Yaga, you're there with
I am.
another question for Gwendolyn, I imagine?
Yes. I was trying to decide if I'm going to ask something general or something about the piece, but I decided about the piece now in the last second. Not only Tzigane, but there are so many moments there. We're building up to really emotions, you know, everything is going crazy. On the second page, after the octaves, when we get to the piano with the arpeggios, I find in this piece in particular, and in many other pieces, from going from fortissimo and working 3 minutes towards that, and then suddenly this beautiful piano. How do you calm yourself down? How do you what I know this is a silly question, but I you can do it with your body, but I find it one of the most difficult things in the cadenza, actually.
That's a huge question, Yaga.
Yeah, sorry.
Question. The flippant answer would be a cup of tea. So we're not going to do that. How do you calm yourself down? I mean, you're basically talking about the nervous system now, and you're talking about really fundamental things that we all experience as performers, as human beings. We are programmed as human beings to have the fight or flight sense. It's very hard for us, particularly when we feel like we are either in danger or excited, to calm down. And most of us, particularly nowadays, and I think actually it's gotten worse in lockdown, we're constantly we've put ourselves under a kind of unconscious constant pressure. We've got text messages coming in, we're supposed to be tweeting about everything we're doing, we're online all the time, we're rushing to at least be presentable from this where up. I mean, I've seen people going on Zoom with, down here it's like their PJs, and up here they look like they're about to go to Wall Street, We have families and friends, we are missing people, we are astounded by the tragedy of our times. I mean, if you actually bother to go back to day one when this whole thing began and think about what's happening, it's nearly, I can't even form words to explain. And then on top of all of that, people having exams, not having exams, people gearing up to something, students, loads of them sort of stuck in limbo. In your case, I happen to know that you were even stuck in limbo in the country you were at, unable to get home, and so on and so forth. And so there's this constant pressure. And then you get excited finally about Ravel. Yay, you can play! And then it's like this mezzo piano, mezzo forte, fortissimo, and rawr! And then suddenly, to be honest, the honest answer, the real answer, I feel that I could responsibly say to you is it's a practice of breath awareness. It's a practice of physical ability to counteract this incredible rush of adrenaline, which you're most likely to do if you are in a form of movement and exercise, preferably daily, even if it's just a few minutes. You said you like stretching. Incorporate ideas of somatic experiences into your daily life. If you have the space and time, go for a run. Get your heart used to pumping. A great sportsman, so I happen to know this, my husband, who I hear prowling around in the background at the moment, I know he wants to go on his bike, so I'm like, whoa. His heart rate is twice as slow as mine. And he's a bit older than me, and I know that we lead similar lifestyles, and that's because he spent years training his heart when he goes on his bike, and he's much more capable to handle stress. The more stress he gets, I notice with him, the more he gets calm, whereas you and I, potentially, the more stress he gets, the more we're like so yes, the answer should be an artistic one. I should be telling you things like ease the weight distribution on your bow, try to think of relaxing the left hand, try to get your shoulders in a sense of a dance and not in a static form. Try to keep your body moving. Try to be supple and subtle in all of your movements. It's a huge topic. But the best thing I can tell you, because I know you a little and know you're interested in it, try to get a daily practice in calming your nervous system by breathing. Learn how to breathe. Make it a conscious act. And I think it might help.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
That's amazing. I also think, if I could add something
Please do.
very short, I think with experience, I think that the more times you perform, if you perform this piece 5 times over 2 weeks, that the 5th time you'll find that when you get to the calm part, you're probably, because you know you can do it more and you garner that experience, and then by time number 4, time number 5, it's not quite such a shock that you did it, and then you can be calmer all the way through, and then you won't have difficulty remaining calm for the calm section. But the exercise idea is also brilliant, and we've all been getting into more exercise, I think, during the last few months, and we had no concerts to give and no traveling to do. So thank you, and thank you for that, Yaga. And for our final question, we go over to Raphael, please.
Yes. What would you do different if you were 12 again?
Tell me, I can't hear you so well because you're a bit away from the microphone. Can you say it one more time for me? What would I do if I was which?
If you were 12 again.
If I was 12.
You're 12.
If I was 12 years old again, what would I do? Oh God, I'd like
Differently.
to play like you do. That's what I wish I would do. I should play half as much as you do, practice half as much as you do, be half as gifted as you are and half as charming. That's what I would do. Be able to speak in a foreign language like you're speaking to me now. Well, okay, I was doing that, I was doing that. Yeah, what I would do again, I would potentially spend a bit more time with my instrument. I spent a lot of time with my instrument, but I didn't spend as much time with myself and the instrument, if you know what I mean. So I was doing a lot of this stuff and not enough of this stuff. So a lot of hand work, a lot of arm work, but not enough work on a bigger picture. And I potentially, if I was 12 again, I would take solfege and harmonic studies and counterpoint and all those things I found boring when I was 12. I'd try to unbore them so that I'd be smarter now. And I would potentially have done a little bit more sports. I was doing sports, but I would do them with more verve. So that when Yaga says, well, what do we do when we calm down? I just go, well, just ask my 12-year-old self or ask Raphael, he'll tell you. But thank you, that's a wonderful question. And thank you again, all of you, for your beautiful playing today. And thank you, Finian, you're very right. Experience helps an awful lot in helping us to calm down.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. Thank you all for this wonderful session. It has been very memorable. I've enjoyed it immensely. Gwendolyn, thank you for your time, for your positive energy, and for your warmth, and for your inspiration. And to our 4 young violinists, I hope we will be gathered soon again on a similar mission. This has been the last of our masterclasses of this year's National Concert Hall's International Master Course, I'm sorry to say. We have the very final session of the course this evening, where we have a panel discussion with all 5 of the faculty. That's Gwendolyn and myself, joined by 3 outstanding musicians from around the world: Gary Hoffman, the cellist, Kim Kashkashian, the viola player, and Gilles Apap, the violinist. And the 5 of us are going to have what promises to be a rather chaotic and very interesting discussion on many different topics to do with music. And we look forward to joining as many people for that as possible. So do join us for that at 7:30 p.m. Irish time this evening.
If I may add, we also have Gary Hoffman still. I don't recall at what time, but we still have a conversation.
Oh, we have Gary's seminar to take place. I think that's at 6 p.m. also Irish time. You're quite right, between now and then. So it's an action-packed afternoon awaits us. So thank you, Gwendolyn, and we'll see each other shortly.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody at the National Concert Hall.
Thanks for the opportunity, folks.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.
Bye-bye. You too.